This meeting is being recorded.
Okay, so quick recap what we have learned last class. So we declared the attribute, and we have seen how the attributes are holding the data, and then we have seen the examples of connecting the input to the attribute, declaring the input lightning colon input, and what are the data is entered by user in the input, how to capture that information, and how to store that information into the attribute that we have seen in the last class, right? So that means, so we have created the component. Sorry. So we have created the component yesterday. So this is a component that we have created, and we declared the attribute. So let's assume the attribute is, we declared it as A, and so we created the lightning input where user will be entering the data. So whenever the user enter the information, for example, this is a lightning input. Okay, I'm entering some information here, 1, 2, 3, 4, I'm entering it. So what it happens is, as soon as I enter the data, so it stores into the attribute. Okay, on click on the button, it calls the controller. So in controller, what we are writing, we are initializing the variable and getting the value from the attribute to here. So if we have a multiple attributes here, I have another attribute which is called as a B, or another attribute which is called as a result. So for that, we have another lightning input. So for example, there is another lightning input, which is an integer data type. And I have to enter the value, and this value will be stored into the, this value stored into the B. And whenever the button click happens, and this value will be, controller will call that attribute details, right? So this is what we have implemented. And finally, what will happen? Based on the logic, it will store the data into the result. So based on the logic, whatever we have written, so what are the output of that result, will be storing it here, and this will be displayed. Once it's stored into the attribute, then we are displaying the result here, right? So this is the whole concept that we have seen yesterday. So let's assume that there is a scenario. I have to create some 100 lightning inputs because I have a page on, let's take an example of registration page. Okay, so registration page for the campus. Let's take USA campus. Okay, so if I'm going for the university in USA, so there are some 5 pages or 6 pages form I have to fill. Okay, so filling the 6 pages form, that means I have to create more than 100 lightning input fields in one component. That means if I create a more than 100 input fields, do I need to create 100 attributes? So here, whatever based on this example, for each input attribute is required to hold the data. But if I have 100 lightning inputs, right? And for each one of them, I have to create each attribute to hold the data for each one of them, right? So in that scenario, do you think aura attribute is really needed? Is there any other way instead of creating a more than 100 attributes? If I create a more than 100 attributes, if I open my component, as soon as I open my lightning component, I'll just see the attributes list. So I have to scroll down to see what are my lightning input, right? So in that case, is there any other way without declaring the attribute? Can I get the value in the controller? Can I get whatever is user entered on the lightning input without using the attribute? Will I be able to get the data? So here basically, this attribute is a mediator between the controller and lightning input. So without this mediator, is there a way that I can call directly from component to controller? Right? So let's see how to do that. So there are two ways which we can do it. Okay, there are two ways which we can do it. If I have to pass the value directly from component on the lightning input to controller, there are two ways. One is aura ID and another one is get source. Okay, these are the two different ways we can directly capture the value of from the lightning input to controller. So let's go ahead and let's take an example that we did yesterday. Okay. Let me create a new component. Zero 0804 aura ID. Submit it. Okay. I'll take the example that we have created yesterday. Okay. So yesterday what we have done, we have created the aura attribute. Now the scenario is without aura attribute, I wanted to create the component. So that means I have to start with my logic with the lightning card. Lightning colon card, and the title is, let's take anything, employee details. Okay. Now I have a card ready at the back end. So inside the card, what we did yesterday, we created the buttons and we created the lightning input. Okay. So let me take the lightning input. For the lightning input, my label is employee name. Okay. I'll just take two others, not more than that. Okay. And the type,
number,
text.
text. Number.
Integer. Salary can be double decimal. Okay. So now I have a 3 input values. Okay. Now I do not want to create a aura attribute. So for that, what I have to go for it? Aura ID. So for each one of the lightning input, I can create a aura ID. Aura ID is the standard keyword for the lightning input. So aura ID has to be a unique key for each individual input. So this is EMP name. This one EMP sal. EMP year of experience. Okay, let me take this. Okay, so now I have a unique values for each lightning input. For the employee name, I'm using the aura ID employee name. For employee salary, I'm using the aura ID EMP sal. For employee year of experience, I'm using the aura ID EMP YOE. Okay. Now I have a component ready. Now let me go to the controller. I need one button here in order to go to the controller, right? So let me use one button. Aura set. And my attribute is, let me put the button at the footer. Lightning button. And my button name is submit. And on click of this button, I wanted to call handle submit function.
C dot.
Okay. Now, as soon as I click on this button, it should go to the controller. And my function name is handle submit. I do not need a helper here because I'm not going to implement a helper. But I need an event because as soon as user enter this, these are the standard events that I'm going to pull on the controller. Okay, in order to pull the values of the input data, what I have to use? Component. So make sure if it is here COMP is there, then use the COMP. If it is a CMP here, use the CMP here. So whatever the name in the function, whatever the parameter name is there, use that function, use that parameter same. So component dot find. Yesterday we had seen component dot set to set the value in the attribute. And we also seen the component dot get to get the value from the attribute. So what are the attributes that holds the data? If I wanted to get that information, then I have to use component dot get. But here I do not have an attribute. First, I need to find which input value I wanted to get. So component dot find what I wanted to find. I wanted to find this particular aura ID lightning aura ID. So wherever this aura ID is there, get the value of that particular aura ID. Okay. So same thing, let's implement for other two. Okay. Now I have the value here. Let me store this value in one of the variable. Okay. I am storing this value. Okay. Right now, what is happening? I declared the lightning input. As soon as I click on the button, capture the information that is present here. Okay. I'm capturing that information using the event. Component.find. I'm finding the aura ID and getting the value. But how do I know whether I'm really getting the exact value that user has entered or not? How to debug that? So it is very important in real-time scenario to use the console.log, because sometimes what happens is do not use the console.log for every line, after every line. If you have any doubtful, like you are getting a complete array, in that array, what is the second, what is the array dot 2, what is the array dot 1, if I wanted to identify, because that field is going to play a major role. So in that case, what you can do is you can put console.log. This is same like a debugger, system.debug. In Apex, we have a system.debug. So like that, in the Lightning, we have a console.log. So once it is deployed to the production, we cannot debug directly, right? I have to go to the inspect and see where exactly is happening. Let me show you what I'm talking about inspect. So console.log, let me print all the values. So this is going to print the value that holds in this particular variable. Okay. Now I have everything is ready. Let me use this component in the existing application. Let's click on preview. So now I'm entering the value here. Swati, some 4545, and years of experience is some 5 years. Submit it. I do not see the value here. In order to see what is the value, go to right click on this and go to the inspect. After clicking on the inspect, go to console.
You missed the C dot
Oh, is it?
while calling. While calling the method.
Oh, okay. C dot. Good. Okay, let's refresh. John, salary 564 and years 4 years. Let's clear this and submit it. So it is printing the name. So in the controller, to identify what is the name, what is the salary, I'll just change the hard-coded value here. So basically the first one is name and the second one is salary and the third one is years of experience. So whatever user has entered, I can capture those information without attribute declaration. So that is using the Aura ID. Now you might be getting confused here. When to use Aura ID and when to use attribute. What is the different scenarios that I have to use Aura ID? Will it work Aura ID for all the scenarios? So can I use directly Aura ID for all the scenarios? No, it's not. If you have a logic depending on the primitive data type, that means if you have any data, so right now, what are the example we have seen? Those are primitive data type. I have not taken any S object here. Okay. These fields are declared within the component. Right. Whenever I use the primitive data type, we have to use the Aura :id. That means I'm not going to store the value at the backend Salesforce. If the requirement is on fly, capture the data and send it to third party. Do not store that information anywhere in the Salesforce. So if this is the scenario, then I have to go with the primitive data type. And I can use the Aura ID. Because client doesn't care what is the value that is entered, we are not going to store that value in the Salesforce at all at the backend. But in case, if I am using the S object, or if I am using any collection data type, okay, or if I'm storing the value somewhere in the Salesforce, it can be record, it can be anything. It can be list, or it can be custom metadata or custom label, whatever it might be. If I'm storing the value within the Salesforce, okay, or if I'm getting the value from the Salesforce, if I'm storing the value in Salesforce, if I'm dealing with the Salesforce data, that means I'm using the S object. So in that case, I need attribute. Aura attribute. I need Aura attribute. Right? So this is the difference.
What about the displaying of data again back to the system UI? Using the RID, we can display that one.
Can you repeat that?
So now let's take, yesterday we have taken input 1 and input 2, and the output is the third variable, right?
Right.
So using the, now we are not able to display back the output, right? So whether using the Aura ID, we can display the same data?
Yes, Aura ID. Okay, so your question is Aura ID used only for Lightning input? Is that the question?
Yes, yes.
No, we can use it for output also. We can use it multiple places. It's not restricted to use only at the Lightning input. No, it is not restricted. Let's take an example that we did yesterday. Okay. So if you go back and think about the logic, like why do we mostly go for the Lightning component? Reusability, right? If you see the component that we have implemented yesterday, these three lines we are reusing it, right? And completely same logic, only the different is plus, minus, and multiplication. Rest all logic is same, right? This is not a good practice. This is not called as a by looking at the code, we can identify whether this developer has a good knowledge in the Lightning or not. So just by looking at the logic in the controller. If you are repeating the same line of code everywhere in every method, that is not a right.
So in that case, we can go for the helper and we can declare our variables, and we can call that helper in the JS component controller, right?
Yes, but there is another way also we can do it. Without helper, we can do another way.
Okay.
So the another way is, let me take these buttons. Let me copy these buttons. Okay, let's use it in the new one. Okay. This is add sub. Here employee name details are there. So let me take the enter the first name, last name, and result. Okay. Okay, this is what we have implemented yesterday.
Yeah.
First number, second number, as soon as the user enter the number, we are doing the calculation based on the action that was clicked by user. Right now,
Yeah.
these three methods are doing the same logic. So let me do one thing. Let me combine these three into the one function. Handle logic. Handle logic. Handle logic. So if user clicks on add, it is going to call the same function. If user click on a sub, it is going to call the same function. If user going to click on merge, it is going to call same function. But it has to change the result. The result will be different based on the label, right? So how to do that? So you remember we had discussed there are two ways which we can do it. One is Aura ID that we have seen. And the another one is get source. Yes. So the one which I'm talking right now is somewhat get source. It's related to get source. So in order to differentiate these buttons, I'll declare a Aura ID. So Aura ID has to be unique. Right. So I have a button which is calling the same function, but I can differentiate based on the Aura ID. Each button is having the unique Aura ID. Let's go to the controller. Let me change this controller. Okay. Handle logic is a function that called by all the buttons. And I need a component and I need an event. Okay. Now, here it is an event. So if we have a EVE, so whatever the parameter is there, use the same parameter here also. Dot get source. Okay, let me store this into the one variable EVT. Event dot get source. And then I need another variable which is from the source, whatever I'm getting the value here, EVT dot get local ID. EVT dot get local ID. This is the local ID values that I'm going to get. Okay. What is a get source? What it will happen if I use it? Event.getSource. Event.getSource is to capture the source of the event. Capture or get the source of the event. Whenever it happened on the component. So what I mean here, this is the event that is happening. Okay. So these are the standard events. Apart from the component event, application event, by default, we have a standard events, which will be fired when we click on the button or when we click on action, right? So that time we call the standard event. So event.getSource is to capture the source of the event that happens on the component. Once I capture the details, from that I wanted to get the local ID values. Local ID of that event. Okay. Now I have these informations. Okay. Now right now what is I need? I need the values that are entered here and here. In first number and in second number, I wanted to first capture. So cmp dot find. What is the aura ID I have? Eval.
Dot get.
Yes. Dot get v dot value. This is my first number. Let's store this as a var a1 equal to. Now same I need it for b value. What is my aura ID? B val. Get the value and store it here. So these are the two values that I need. Now, as soon as I get these two values, the first thing is that I need to identify whether user clicked on add or submit or multiplication, which one he clicked on it. How to identify that?
Event source, get source.
Right. So we are getting the source here. From that, I'm getting the local ID. So this LID, which will contain this aura ID. Okay, this is for add. This is for sub, and this is for multiplication. The reason I have written this var outside, because these values are same. Whatever the button I click on it, values are not going to change. The only change is result. The result will be changed. Right? I can declare the var result outside of the if condition. So result equal to parts in it. We have seen the parts in it yesterday. So if it is a text or whatever it might be, it will convert into it will parse into integer. A1 plus parts int B1. Right, same thing I need it for sub as well. Only thing, this is going to change. Here it will be multiplication. Now I'm getting the values here. Now I need to set this back to result. In order to set this back, we have seen component.find.get is I'm going to get it. Now I do not have an attribute to set back. How can I set the value? Same way, like whatever we are doing it for get, we have to do it for same. cmp.find my aura id dot set and v dot value comma whatever my result.
Okay.
Now this is going to be the same for sub here, here, here. So what I'll do, I'll take out this line and put it. After doing all the condition, after verifying all the conditions, set my result. Okay, instead of repeating the same line, here, here, here. Fine? Clear? So now let's go ahead and see. This is Aura ID. I have already there in the application. Okay, let me refresh this. First number 25. If I click on add, handle logic parts int is not defined.
Spelling mistake.
Oh yeah. Hers. Okay, let's refresh. $20, 10, click on add 30, sub 10, multiplication 200. See? So we need not to write multiple method. If we have a lines, if we are repeating the lines, use it in smart way. So that what will happen, we need not to write again and again same line in different methods or different functions. We need not to write. So different ways we can do it, like calling the helper, you can do it, or ID, you can use it, get source, you can use it, different ways we can use it. So in the here, local ID. So local ID, also we have a global ID. Okay. Local ID is nothing but if I declare the ID here, okay, this will work only in this component. It will not work in another component. In another component, again, I have to declare the ID. So local ID is nothing but it will be restricted to the individual component. Whereas global ID, as term says, it is going to use for the multiple component. If I have a chain of the component, parent, child, grandchild, grandchild, if I have a number of components are calling in the same, in that case, if there is any ID which is playing a role in the every component within the chain. So in that case, what I can do, I can declare the global ID. And then I can use that ID wherever I need it in the entire component. Right? So far, till now, what we have seen everything. Declaring like a first name calculator, second name calculating something, or we have used everything as a primitive data type. Till now, we have not taken any example to call the S object records. Like in Salesforce, we have a account, contact, opportunity, these records are there, right? how to get those records. We will see it in the next session. But till now, are you clear? Because everything we are doing it to understand the commands, how to use each command.
Yeah, I'm clear.
You're clear, right? So any component, we write it. These are the generic structure which we are going to use it. So we have to understand this first, then only we can go and see the real-time examples, how we are going to get the S object details.
Yeah, got it.
Let me stop the recording.